Hey, everybody. So today we have a very special guest, my good friend, Jay. Jay is a man that does not need a formal introduction. You could just look at his face and right away, boom, you know who he is. And the energy is just incredible. Jay is a serial entrepreneur, has launched many companies, has failed also, and that's the part we want to hear. He's also he launched the largest and most successful incubator within India called T-Hub. And just recently, a few months back, he has joined as a partner in a venture fund called SRI Ventures. And I am personally very excited, and I'm sure everyone else will be excited to hear Jay's story. So Jay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. And I've been humbled by this fantastic introduction that you put out. So thanks for that. Thank you. I wish my wife was here to hear all the good stuff.
We'll send the recording afterwards.
Thanks, friend.
So Jay, let's jump right in and let's start all the way from the beginning. Before you became this whole, big entrepreneur, big investor, the T-Hub and everything else. Let's start off from your humble beginnings.
Yep.
A little Jay, where are you from and what was your upbringing like?
Got it. Yeah, so I grew up pretty much all over India. My dad was in the then what's called the central government. There were not too many options back then in the 70s and 80s. So we were middle class at best. And upbringing was all about staying the course. My dad was known to be one of the journeymen of the Upright Citizens Brigade. So he never deviated from the script. And I think that's the one thing that he taught my brother and I growing up. So I have a younger brother. So it was the four of us, mom, dad, and the two of us. And given the role that he played, we kept getting shuttled around in different cities. So I think I've done about a dozen cities in the 12 years that I went to school. And then I did my undergrad in electrical engineering. And then I went to the US like all Indians then did in the 90s to figure out your ticket to the US and get a job there. And I was no different. That's exactly what I did. And I went to University of Hartford, Connecticut with a scholarship because my dad couldn't afford it. In fact, I remember my dad telling my brother and I that the one thing I will do for you is break the bank and get you both the one-way ticket because that's all I can afford. The rest of it is up to you. So that's what I did. So in grad school, I had the opportunity of working with my advisor who back then, and this is 97, and now you know how old I am.
I thought you're 22 or 23, man.
Thank you. Thanks for that. So we worked on a fairly cool project that used a fair amount of signal processing and AI, and it went on to be its own little sidekick startup. But then I joined a very interesting company in the Boston area in the telecom space that did voice over IP, which then went public. And then it eventually got hyped off and worked under Intel Dialogic, a company called Brooktrout. And I was part of the early hardware team members. So I really got to learn a lot from semiconductor stuff to subsystem engineering to manufacturability of hardware to compliance to FCC sales. So it was a fabulous journey. And I remember I had to choose between that company and Intel straight out of school. And one of the best pieces of advice that I got, I mean, nothing against Intel, but one of the best pieces of advice that I got was if you work in a smaller company, you get to do everything from being the coffee boy to the staff manager. And that's exactly what I did. And then following that, I did a bunch of product management work and a little bit of general management work and strategy and BD with companies like Juniper Networks and Cisco. And I moved to India through those companies and continued reporting to Mothership back in the US. And then I did my first startup with friends of mine from undergrad as well as from grad school, from business school, a company called Radifinity, which got acquired by a large Indian conglomerate, the Birlas. And then I did another startup with my buddy from business school, and that didn't go anywhere. Um, Following that, and that was all in Bangalore. And the board of T Hub then reached out and said, "Hey, listen, we're looking for some guy who's got experience as an entrepreneur, but also has been in the corporate world. And the idea is to build an incubator. And would you like to relocate to Hyderabad and and do it?" And I did. Excuse me. So when I moved to Hyderabad with...
So I'm going to stop you right there, right? So before we get into the whole tee-up process, so how does a kid, that grew up, that stepping out of line, not the way to go? We're not talking about, reward punishment, but stepping out of line was not appreciated. You had to go the path. You had to step. How does a kid like that go from growing up like that to going to the US to getting into entrepreneurship and starting startups? I mean, that's just polar opposite. Stepping in line is like, okay, I have to go work for a regular corporation, work for 40 years. I pray to God that I stay happy and then retire, and yada, yada, yada.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, I had absolutely no intention of deviating from the script. Until I met my now wife, who comes from business for a long time. And she's the one who said, listen, if you don't take risk, there's only so much you can do in life. And that's going to be very incremental. That journey of success, however you want to define success, be it money, be it fame, be it recognition, happiness, it's going to be very incremental. You can't change your destiny. But if you step out of line, and do something radical and have the approach to change the world. Unfortunately, now you can use technology to change the world. You can turn entrepreneur. And the joke there with her was that I never wanted to move back as much as the idea of entrepreneurship was very exciting. And I told her that, hey, listen, there's this great sport called baseball, and there's a great team called the Boston Red Sox. And the year they win, we will leave the US and go back to India. I thought it's a very safe bet after they won it thrice, because they had not won for 86 years or whatever. Right? And after they won thrice, she really got into the sport. And she said, listen, they won thrice now. I think it's time. But jokes apart, I think the time had come and the US was going through its own thing. And India was just about beginning to wake up. And I said, listen, if people like me don't go back to India and make a difference and be an entrepreneur, test it out, test the waters, I'll never be able to do it. And the second reason was, using a surfer's analogy, what are the odds that in one's lifetime you can ride the wave twice? So in the late 90s, I got to see the boom and the bust in the valley, in the US at large. And I thought, all right, let's test the waters out in India while I'm no longer necessarily young, but young and stupid back then, but now just not young. So that's really the reason. She's, I think, the reason why we moved back.
Wow. And it's phenomenal also, because besides obviously the new generation of entrepreneurs, a lot of the old timers are not the people that, the older guys, in venture capital or even like the older startups are all people that moved back from the US and wanted to catch this wave and get involved in a real difference in the startup ecosystem.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And the beauty of what you just mentioned is that all the young entrepreneurs that you see now in India, and I just want to call all the 20-year-olds young, who are building these amazing new startups are beginning to realize that as these companies scale, the one thing that's missing in the Indian ecosystem, purely on account of the nascency of the ecosystem, is lack of processes. And the right set of people who bring processes that allow for scale are people who've been entrenched in companies that have seen processes. And the best set of candidates who fill that gap are the guys who worked in places like the US, in companies like Intel and Cisco. And these are perfect middle managers in their 40s who are now joining these 20-year-olds and making a difference. And I think that's fascinating.
Right. So I want to ask you a question, like a side question. Behind every great man is a much better woman. You know?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
how much does relationship play
Yeah.
into entrepreneurship, or I guess not, I wouldn't say success of entrepreneurship, or in the journey of entrepreneurship? How much does a being in a relationship help that out? And,
Oh, that's a brilliant question. And I think there's a lot of attributable success that should go to the people behind the scenes, and I don't think girlfriends and wives and boyfriends don't get as much credit as they should. In my particular case, I think my wife played a huge role in two aspects. One was the notion of, so she's a banker. She used to be an investment banker. It's a fascinating story. So she was an investment banker turned art gallerist. Um, but back when she was the support, to use iBanking parlance, there were two pieces of support that she offered. One was the emotional support on a tough day, and that was pretty much every day. Um, and the second was the whole fixed income equity personal portfolio. So I was the equity guy, she was the fixed income person, and I kept taking the risk, and she kept bringing bread to the table, and that really worked. So on multiple fronts, I think that played a huge role.
I know, like you said, we don't give enough credit to the people behind the scenes. The people that we
Yeah,
with. Like you said, we come back, we have a terrible day. Things didn't
yeah,
go right. An investment went sour. An entrepreneur's not listening. Our startup
yeah,
failed. Whatever it could be, and they're there to
right.
back up on a daily basis. Listen to our complaints. Listen to us, about the world. Listen to us complain about the world, and they're there for us.
That's right.
Wow, that's so important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It should be like a
I
prerequisite.
think in my case, to your point, when I was a kid, I really looked up to my mom for all the. She kept it together for all of us. When I got hitched, and when I was dating prior to that, it was really my wife Lakshmi. And now I have a 7-year-old, and it's her. So I think there have been 3 generations of women that have really shaped me to be who I am.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So let's jump right back into your story, and
Hmm.
we go back into TIAP.
Yeah.
What was the journey of TIAP? I'm fascinated to see TIAP. And you're not involved anymore.
Yeah.
You built it into something that's well respected, not just in India but around the world. You had
Right.
everyone from the CEO of Microsoft to obviously a lot of government in India, and people around the top CEOs from around the world come to
Right.
TIAP and check it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you build such a phenomenal um, organization? I mean, even though it's a startup, how did you build such an incredible startup for itself? That's what it is, really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of credit should be given to people where it's due. I think I was just the driver of the bus. The bus itself was fantastic. Great vehicle, great engineers behind it, great traffic policemen who arbitrated in the right direction. But to go back to the story from a bottom-up perspective, I remember when I got interviewed and I laid out the vision to the board. One of the things that really resonated with the board, as well as with what I wanted to do, was were really two things. Number one, it needs to operate like a startup that very quickly gets to sustainability slash profitability, and therefore you don't take government money. And number two, keeping the government at a very healthy arm's length relationship, because that allows for scale. And the attributable reason behind that is, number one, governments across the world have a really thankless job as it is. There's so much stuff to get fixed. And number two, governments by design have only one form of revenue, which is taxes, and you're not supposed to be gallivanting with it. Right? You're supposed to hedge the risk, build roads, build infrastructure, create jobs, and that's the role of being able to navigate through risk and not take risk. Whereas entrepreneurs are all about taking risk, keep taking risk till it clicks, and never the twain shall meet. Which is why it was important that that it's not dictated by government's control. And fortunately, the board was very, very, very in sync with that. In fact, prior to me even coming in, that's what they wanted. And even better was the state of Telangana and the IT minister, KTR, and the corresponding bureaucrat, Jayesh, were probably the two best folks that I can think of who were already there thinking along these lines, dreaming really big. So it was really a trifecta of all this coming together. And then when it got to operations, Srinivas, who was my COO, uh, really was plugged into the ecosystem, and he believed the same thing too. So when we got down to the brass tacks of it, the first thing I laid down was we are going to break even in 12 months. So the question is, what does it take? And it took a bunch of ingredients to make that happen. So we put together processes, we put together an ideation philosophy. Anyone with an idea can come in, and then put budgets allocated to it. And then, of course, we scaled up. We had these 3 pillars that allowed us to break even. And sure enough, today it is an entity that sustains by itself. Government's very proud of it. Government's happy. We're happy that the government's propelling it. Yep.
Wow, that's incredible. And you see so much incredible innovation coming out of TUP.
That's right. Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. One of the things that we were very keen to do was, if you look at ecosystems across the world that have hit it out of the park, and really two opposite ends of the spectrum, and by that I mean Silicon Valley in the US, which is a melting pot for people to come in, and it represents every sector. It's got great diversity. It represents every technology element. And the other end of the spectrum, you have an area of the world which has tremendous IP, but no market, and that's Israel. Both of them are true ecosystems that can be put on a pedestal, and you can aspire to be one or the other, right? So we figured we lie somewhere in between. We have a market, but it doesn't pay. We have great technology, great diversity, kind of like the Valley. So we are sort of in between in terms of mindset. So we figured that what it takes to succeed is, here's the incubator, which is for all the startups in and within the city. But then we're going to build these amazing programs where entrepreneurs from across the world can come in, take part in those programs, accelerate to market, and then they go back to wherever they are. Right. At the other end of the program, we figured we're going to get large corporates to come in and say, listen, I can't innovate at the pace that startups do. But I'm going to give you all these problem statements that I have, but I have a little bit of budget that I'm going to toy around with. You go and find me entrepreneurs. Right. So we took that, built these corporate innovation accelerators, and we worked with so many countries, so many corporates. We delivered success, and that's how we found crazy pieces of innovation. And they went back to where they are, but they all left a piece of them behind, and it allowed for them to hire people and build their companies out of India. So yeah, so that really worked out.
Right. Wow. So I'd love to get your general opinion. Where is the Indian startup ecosystem holding currently, and where do you see it going forward?
It's a tough one. Most of India's startup ecosystem today is propelled by the massive consumer story. You know, India is a country filled with problems and challenges. So an entrepreneur looks at it and says, wow, land of opportunity, I'm going to build stuff that's going to bridge that gap. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it has been consumer, right? So you need 3 things to make this happen. You need great pieces of technology, you need a massive market, and you need capital that bridges the two. Up until now, India had the first 2. They had great talent. Invariably, they were going after the US, but let's see if that changes. Number 2, you have a market. Sure enough, there is a market, very frugal market. Indians, as you know, don't like to pay, which then brings in this element of, hey, can I build a product with incredibly low price points that folks will be forced to pay? And literally, as of the last 5 years, we've had capital coming in. In the last 2 years, we've also have had success in terms of return of capital. You know, there's been M&A, there's been IRR to the tune of double digits as far as the investors are concerned. So it's literally all coming together now. I think looking ahead, what will be fascinating, and I say this with a little bit of personal bias, is hopefully the enterprise story takes off. You know, the consumer story needs a lot of capital because a lot of money is going towards acquiring customers, acquiring market share. Will the customers stick around? I don't think so. You know, because the stickiness of a customer in the consumer sector is very low. Customers will switch the minute you get a lower price product or a product that's easier to use. Whereas enterprise, deep tech is much more robust, much more reliable, longer duration, much more regimented in the way you go about selling it, your distribution strategy, your channel strategy, etc. So I hope that the next few years we'll have some incredible B2B and enterprise startups come out of India. And I think in the last 1 or 2 years, we've seen some tremendous ones come out.
Right.
So looking ahead, I think I hope that the B2B story becomes robust in India. And again, a place to look at is Israel. The amount of tech that comes out of Israel, which finds its way to the West as a market, it's just fascinating.
Right. Well, and definitely will come. And within time, that B2B would definitely will come. So based upon that, the building, you have an entrepreneur that's trying to build a B2B startup. You wrote an article, 6 points. It's 6 points of, I guess, the best way to phrase it would be, I guess, how to deal with failure and what it means to be an entrepreneur. Right? And you go about and say, don't be an entrepreneur to be an entrepreneur. Hire and right, pay for hunger and experience. So a phenomenal thing. What does it mean, to be an entrepreneur?
I get a sense that a lot of entrepreneurs just like to CEO-ish themselves, right, to build a company. And invariably, a lot of them will fail. And I think the right approach to entrepreneurship should be ready to fail. I mean, I failed multiple times. It's not taboo. You learn from it, number one. Number two, get into it to solve a real problem. A lot of times, entrepreneurs build a product and think that the market wants it, and very quickly find out that the market has absolutely no appetite for something like that. So you think that the sex appeal of the product is so high because of the features it has and the capability of the product, but if the market doesn't want it, the market won't pay for it, and at best that can be described as a vocation. Like it's not a company that you're building. So I would say start with the pain first. If there is a pain, there is a problem, and can you fix that problem cheaper, faster, easier, etc., then you want to go after it. Number two, don't get into it to make money. Then you're putting the cart before the horse, right? The money will come. Number three, don't look at investments as the end goal. The investment is just a means to the end. It's not the end. The end is still the pain problem that you're solving. I think those would be the three things for which one should turn into an entrepreneur in that sequence.
Right. 100%. If you're chasing the fame, the success, the money, it never comes. If you look at all the entrepreneurs around the world, and the most successful ones, they dealt with a personal issue within their own lives or someone else's, and they had that, like you mentioned, that pain point which they wanted to solve, and that made them great. So knowing that it's okay to fail is a phenomenal lesson. And you, like you mentioned, you failed a few times. How can you overcome failure? That personal, downpour that you just feel like, forget about it, I'm not going to be successful, or this. How do you overcome it?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think number one is just humility, and that's a tough one to begin with, because if you maintain humility and accept the fact that you know nothing, and I truly believe in the fact that none of us know anything. I mean, all we need to do is look at the rate of expansion of the universe, and you get a sense of, man, the insignificance of human life in this grand scheme of things is just crazy, right? So number one, I think, is humility. Number two is, unless you embrace failure, you'll never be able to get up and fight back and build whatever is to be built again. And invariably, entrepreneurs are people, regardless of age, who want to get back up and fight the system, fight whatever it is that you want to fight to get back up there. So the concept of wanting, and not just wanting, but embracing the idea of swimming against the tide all the given time, is what I think allows one to become successful. In my case, I've failed multiple times in life. The biggest failure I had as an entrepreneur was the inability to work with my then investors. And the company dived before I could know it, and get a grasp of what's going on. And I couldn't raise capital from the right at the right time from the right set of people. That was one issue that I had. The other issue that I had much before that was, if largely speaking, in the context of failure, was when I was in college. I just didn't understand the need for some of these courses. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to let it go and I'm going to flunk it. I could care less. so, um, so yeah, different moments in time and different points of failure. And you just don't care about what the world thinks of you. You just fall, you dust yourself, get back again, and just be humble about it. Yeah.
Wow. Now, tell me, like, we're going to turn that question around and face it towards life. What are the lessons of life you picked up along the way on this incredible journey?
I think the biggest one is awareness. Just be aware of what you say and what you do so that the impact that it has on people has a ripple effect. And therefore, if you're negative, it's only going to be negative to the people around you, and that's going to be just collateral damage. So I think the trick is to stay as positive as you can, regardless of what you go through. And that's the biggest lesson I've learned. So I think awareness and radiating positivity is a big one. It's a tough one, but it's so key. The second one, which I learned a long time ago from my boss, is that shit always flows downhill, right? And you don't want to create an avalanche of that, because someone's going to face it, number one, or number two, you're going to face it if you're downhill. So again, going back to staying positive and not wanting to affect other people negatively. I think that's the awareness element is a big one.
I love that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So then let's go talk to me about, the darkest day you had in entrepreneurship journey. And tell me about the emotions of going back to that period.
Oh man. I think when my startup failed and we had to let go of about 60 or 70 people, there was one. And realizing that all their lives are impacted when they had banked on us, my co-founder and I think that was a tough one. The second was also personally when we had, my co-founder and I, again, we had literally and figuratively taken everything out of the bank and put it behind this venture. And when it failed and it went dust, we had literally lost everything, all our savings, all our wife's savings. And our investors, when they came after us and said, some of them came after us and said, I need my money back. And we kept trying to get them to understand that this is a startup that failed. I mean, unfortunately, there is no money back. I wish I had that money to give you back. I think so. Dealing with all those elements at the same time, and culturally trying to rise up and figure out what do we do next. That was a tough one, and it lasted for months.
Wow, thank you. That's really vulnerable. That's like, wow, I can only imagine what you're going through back then. It's insane.
Yeah. But the trick is to come out of it and say, hey, listen, I can rise up and do something on my own, and not just get sucked into that vortex. I think that was very karmic and therapeutic.
Right. Wow. And look what you became.
You begin to doubt yourself. You begin to question yourself as to, holy crap, I'm an utter failure. I don't know if I'm capable of doing anything in life. There's got to be a bunch of things that I've messed up. And if you get sucked into that, there's no coming out of it. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, 100%. So now in your gig right now in SRI Capital, what do you look for in a entrepreneur?
The big thing that we look for, other than, there are the usual elements, right? Is the technology great? Is it scalable? Is the market big enough? While all that is to be checked off, I think I personally look for the entrepreneur. I look for the personality traits. Is this guy or woman willing to adapt? Because at the end of the day, you're much better off having a great individual with an average product with an okay market, as opposed to having a great product, fantastic market, and a terrible individual. So if the market turns around and if the product needs to be rebuilt, are we backing the right person? So I think for me, personality matters a lot. how the person interacts with you, how the person deals with stuff that you give him or her. I think matters a lot. I mean, I've had an entrepreneur, just to give you an example, recently, who said, as I started asking him about his company, and he said, uh, "Do you guys even understand anything in technology? Because all you VCs are guys who come from some fancy business school. You don't even understand what the word cloud means." And I said, "Hey, no, we do. You're not that bad. But I hear you. I understand where you're coming from, because in your world, and I've sat there, you're probably pitching every day to 3 VCs, and you're thinking, what is wrong with these guys, right? Why don't they get me?" So yeah, so to answer your question, I think the individual as a human being is, I think, what matters the most to me.
Right. Yeah. Wow. And then I guess that answers the question too. Like, if you're presented the good product, bad entrepreneur, good entrepreneur,
Yeah.
bad product, how do you evaluate that? And it's what you just addressed too. So who are some of the people that have made a difference in your life and who you look up to?
I would say the three folks in close affinity would certainly be my parents, my wife, and my kid. My kid just gives, I mean, the kid is too young, she's 7, but then it gives me perspective as to what am I doing, whatever I'm doing for. Right? So that helps me unravel that layer. But from I think my early bosses at my workplace were terrific mentors. Um, I remember one of my first episodes at work at Brook Trout was literally my first week at work, and I was given this product which had been sitting on the shelf for years. And these guys, I don't think they expected me to go fix it, but they gave it to me and said, "Hey, listen, this is not passing a bunch of tests. Why don't you go play with it and see if it's going to pass a bunch of compliance tests so that it can get released to the market?" And one of these tests is an FCC test where you can ship this thing and it doesn't radiate. So one of the things that I went around and asked with this tiny little electronic board that I had was, "Hey, how do I get this to work?" And most of the guys, and keep in mind, I'm a young 21-year-old engineer, first week at work. Most of the guys told me, "Jay, have you RTFM'd?" And I didn't know what it meant. I mean, that first week I had heard a lot of engineering jargon, which is very different from what you hear in school. In school, it's a lot of theory. And here in the real world, it's things like MWI, manufacturing work instruction, ECO, engineering change order, BOM, bill of materials. So when I heard RTFM, I figured, okay, this is another engineering terminology. I just got to go figure out what is RTFM. So I went up to who was my then boss, who turned out to be my mentor, and said, "Hey, Eric, where can I find the RTFM for this product?" And he goes, "Why don't you sit down? Because I think you need to know what the RTFM is to begin with. And shut the door behind you." And then I did that. And he goes, "Look, the first thing you need to understand is before you go talking to engineers in hardware, firmware, software, learn about what they've done and contributed to this board." And that's what they mean by RTFM. RTFM was read the fucking manual. So I got to do a lot of reading the fucking manual before I started asking questions to people. But that's stuck for life. I mean, when I go into a meeting today, I read a lot and I get prepared. Even to this meeting, I love the fact that you sent me these questions and I was reasonably prepared so I could stitch up my thoughts together. And that stayed for life. So I think, to go back to your question, I think some of these mentors have been phenomenal in my life. I mean, little nuggets of wisdom, but when it's stuck, it's stuck.
Right. Wow. That's incredible. I love that. RTFM. I'm going to start using
it.
So what are some of the books? I mean, I'm not sure if you're a big reader or not, but what are the books you recommend for others and that have changed also your perspective and how you do things?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, I read a lot. And the trick is to figure out what is relevant now in this time and space. The two that I've really liked in the last few months, which I think is extremely relevant in completely two different contexts. One is Grit, and it's all about it's about the hustle in life and the grit that is the underlying denominator that makes people, well, not successful, but to strive and be who they are. And I fell in love with the book. The other is a book which has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, but I loved it because, I'm a very, very, very social media shy person. I'm not on any platform. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. The only thing I'm on is LinkedIn, purely for professional reasons. Um, and I believe that we live in a day and age where social media, as powerful as it is, can be a phenomenal detractor and distractor. I've never understood why people take pictures of what they eat and post it on Instagram. Uh, um, Fundamentally driven by the belief system that there's so much to do in there's so little time. So why would one post pictures of selfies are a thing that I've never understood. But this book that I picked up and read because I never understood the value of the book, and I think this is another adage which I now truly appreciate. When people told me youth is wasted on the young, I never got it. I never understood what that meant in my 20s. I truly get it now. And using that adage, I picked up the translation of this Indian book, the book of one of India's big epics called the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata is a piece called the Bhagavad Gita, where this guy is supposed to fight his cousins, and he's asking his charioteer all these questions about existentialism. And the charioteer is this Indian god called Krishna, and he's giving all this advice. When I read it, I don't even know why I read it, but back when I read it as a kid, I just thought it's good over bad, white over black, or whatever, right? But now, as I read these questions, I get a sense of the purpose as to why am I here. And every single question that's there in that book is about the depth of existence. What is right? What is wrong? Is it truthful? Is it going to hurt someone? And if it does, why does one still do it? So all these questions, to me, I love the book because of the fact that I could relate a lot of it to the social media generation and the struggle that a lot of these kids have. I say kids, but youth have, with regards to living their life through the digital device, and a lot of them do. And yeah, so I think these are the two books that I really
What
liked.
was that book called? The second book?
It's a very, very it's an epic called the Bhagavad Gita.
Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, it's a big Indian treatise. Yeah, I'll be happy to send you the translated version of it. Very simplistic, very broken down. This guy in the 50s wrote this book. He's a big friend of Mahatma Gandhi. I just loved it. It was brilliant.
And it's phenomenal, like you say, that whole concept, because what the problem is against social media, this whole thing is that people live through the eyes of others. And also it's very easy to put on this whole fake persona of,
right.
Look what we're eating, look at the vacation going on, and look how beautiful we look, or look X, Y, Z. But really behind it could be a very sad person that really needs help, but they don't know how to get out for help. So they think their way of therapy is just to post, and people. Right. So it's a whole separate conversation, and it's a whole epidemic that needs its own help.
Exactly. It needs the A out of AI, and I think that's what's going to solve it.
And that's a great startup idea. If you're able to have AI run through a bunch of profile pictures, run through pictures on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and able to determine who's really happy, who's not happy, who's going to fall sick to this, and send them help before they need it. Actually know they need it.
Correct. Absolutely.
So what do we tell a young Jay, looking at the rules for the first time? So he's gone through his whole experience of education. He's out of university now, is yet to start working or go on this whole entrepreneurship journey. What message do we tell him when he's facing the world for the first time?
I think the biggest message I would tell myself multiple times over is two things. A, failure is okay, and B, don't be afraid. The absolute worst thing that will happen to you is death. Big deal. But as a kid, I was so fearful of trying anything because I was just scared. Now when I look back, what's the big deal? Right? Just be fearless.
Wow. That's incredible. And now we see what you're doing with obviously what you did now, but also with SRI Cat Ventures. Now we see the whole fearless warrior in you coming out and trying to help as many entrepreneurs as possible. You know,
I hope so. I absolutely hope so. I don't know if it's happening, but I really hope so.
It's definitely going to happen.
Thank you. Thanks for reaffirming the faith in me. Yep.
So Jay, this has been absolutely phenomenal. You know, this is the first of many conversations we're definitely going to have to do because there's so much more knowledge that you have that we did not even tap into yet. You know, you have many years of experience you have running T-Hub and now with SRI Ventures and then everywhere else. The amount and wealth of knowledge that you have, eventually we'll have to put it into a book, but it has to, you know, to start putting it out more.
Hey, thank you so much. It's been tremendous talking to you. I love the fact that even through a digital device, the energy levels that we struck a chord on was fantastic. Right. So I love talking to you. Thanks for that. Thanks for the feedback.
And it goes without saying, you know, anything you need for you personally, your family, or for SRI or anyone else, please don't hesitate to reach out. You know, we're always here for you guys.
Hey, I totally appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I really look forward to when you visit India, and I insist that you stay with us. You'll get a true Indian experience. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hanging out with you.
Looking forward. Thank you so much.
Hey, take care. Thanks, Ephraim.